Never could have made it. Never would have made it without you. I would have lost it all. But now I see how you were there for me. Now I can say. Hi there, this is Auntie, and I am coming to you with a review on Iylana Fix My Life. This was a very serious episode, and it really needs to have the seriousness of Auntie today. So we start off with a family that's in crisis. It's 6 sisters and a mother. And Iylana starts off the episode by saying family means more than the people related by blood. Family is people who have positive, unconditional regard for one another. And this family absolutely does not have that. You know, we see the sisters, you know, as they begin to come in. We have the sister named Keisha. And Keisha is the second to the oldest. She's 31 years old. She recently lost her father, and then she realizes through that time is short and she really needs to mend her sisters and the relationship between them. Then we have Shay, who's the oldest child. She's 35 years old, and she feels like she took care of her sisters and she was robbed of her childhood. The next sister that we see is Marcia Honesty. She's the second to the oldest, and she's 26 years old. I don't see how she's second to the oldest, but she's, I guess, the third to the oldest. Well, no, she's not. She's the second to the youngest. I take that back. She's the second to the youngest. Then we have Precious Tucker, who's 29 years old. She's the third from the oldest, so she's underneath Keisha. The next sister that Precious was given away as 7 moms, and she was never told that she was loved by her mother. How terrible. The next sister that we see is Bianca. Bianca was also raised by somebody else. She's 27 years old and currently has 4 children. She was raised by her grandparents and was later taken into custody by her aunt who adopted her. And the last but not least is Markel. She's 25 years old. She's the baby of the family. She was in prison for 6 years for armed robbery and says that she has a wonderful relationship with her mother. Y'all, just when you think that your family life is jacked up and you have problems in your family, you look at somebody else. One thing that I realize in black households is that we have a dysfunction that we have not talked about for years. It has absolutely been paramount to the current state of our being today. And so we're going to talk about this in some detail. But this is a really serious subject, you all. Thank you so much for everybody who is watching this review. Auntie is, you know, a little emotional about this episode. And so you're not going to see that laughter part of Auntie today. But she will return when she talks about something else that's not as serious as this. But thank you again so much for being here. Like and subscribe to my channel, and make sure that you share my videos with your family and friends. So let's get started. You know, are introduced to all the sisters. You know, they, you know, upstairs in the room, and they're bickering. The 3 oldest girls are in the room together, and they're kind of bickering about why they have 3 beds in one room. And then, you know, the sister Marcia gets on the bed, and the older sister Shay is like, you know, I should have that bigger bed. I'm the oldest sister. And so, you know, in a regular household, that would have been okay. But in this particular household, seems like fun and games with the sisters, you know, kind of bickering lightheartedly about the situation with the bed. But we all know that there are some undertones with the sisters. And so Iylana comes through the door, and then, you know, the girls come down and greet her and everything. And she hugs them all, and she says, oh, it's so many of you all. How long has it been since you've been together? And they were like 19 years. And so Iylana was like, oh, we're going to have like a big birthday party, a big sleepover type thing. Or even y'all going to pull each other's hair out. So then she goes out and she takes Keisha out into the yard. Again, Keisha is the second to the oldest, and she is labeled the peacemaker. She's the one that keeps peace amongst the sisters and stuff like that, but it's starting to be a burden on her. She tells Iylana that she didn't think that she was going to come, and she was like, why? You know, why not? And she basically told her, because it was so many women, I took your case. I get thousands and thousands of letters, but because of that, I took your particular letter more seriously, and I decided that I would go ahead and do it because women are the anchor to the family, and particularly black women. They are the anchor to the family. After the youngest sister goes into her Sermon on the Mount, again, Iylana tells her, you know, it's more responsibility of being a parent than just parenting the children. You have to first be whole and complete in your own self. Goes on to talk about, you know, you have to be whole within yourself and not giving your children the crumbs of yourself. And she was saying that a lot of times, you know, keeping the children is not good for a child. Let's examine that a little further. So, you know, Iylana in her side comments says that, you know, she believes that the best thing that Alicia did for Precious or for the sisters is not keeping them, and that, you know, they need to have the opportunity to hear the mother's story so that they can heal and move on from it. And then she asks Precious, you know, why am I here? And Precious says to heal the relationships, because I live thousands of miles away from my sisters and I want to be able to talk to them. And Iylana tells her, you know, that's based on relationship. And so, you know, the other sister, Marcia, goes on and says, well, we don't really know Precious. And then the youngest sister then comes out of her trick bag and tries to say something, and the Iylana was like, you know what, that's your biggest problem. What you're going to have to learn is that you can't stand equal with them. I absolutely agree with that. You came along, you are only 25 years old, and you got your sisters 35 years old. They have 10-year difference on you, 9-year difference on you, 8-year difference on you. You even had your other sister, Precious, who's 29 years old, 4 years before you were born, was given away. Okay, we later on discover that Precious is the result of a rape. So let me tell you something, Miss Markell, keep your mouth shut. You sit back and you listen and you learn a little bit, because you got your own issues too. Anytime you are a young female, you done did 6 years in jail. That means that you started off in crime and robbery at least 18 years old. You sit back and learn something, boo. Keep your mouth shut for a little while. Iylana goes in to talk about the progression and telling the youngest sister, you don't get the right to, you know, line up with your older sisters. Shay, who is the older sister, is the one that's going to be the one that's going to speak for you, because she's the elder and everybody else is following her example. So you get to talk when somebody else, one of the other sisters yields the floor to you or gives you the permission, and she looking around all stupid and crazy and everything. It's not a joke, boo. She's being serious about this. This is a healing process. May not be something that you went through when you were born, but it sure is healing for the other sisters. And then, you know, as we sit there and we watch it, Precious is just crying and crying and crying and crying, and she just can't really get herself together. To tell them that she had a sister who was older than her, who got on her nerve, and she says, I didn't speak to my sister for 3 years, and she said, you know, because she was just mean and nasty, and she said, and it wasn't until I got a call that I realized I didn't get a second chance. She was letting the sisters know and giving them that story to let them know that, you know, even though you have a lot of dissension in your family, you never get a chance to get a second chance. Once they're gone and then they in the grave, you can't do it over. And so she asks the sisters, you know, is it important for you all to build this relationship? And they're like, yeah. So she asks Shay, you know, what do you want out of it? And Shay is like, I just want to be with my sisters. That's all I want. I could care less about my mother. And Iylana was like, that's not going to work out well for you. You know, the mother is the root. you know, when you have a weed that's out in your lawn, the thing about it is you can cut and mow the lawn all day long, but that weed is going to continue to grow. It's not till you put some weed killer on it or pull it up from the root, you know, have a weed killer that's going to kill it at the root, that you're going to be able to deal with that weed coming back up. Well, the mother is a weed. And they have to be, she's a nucleus, she's an atom to everything that has happened in these young ladies' lives. That's not to say that the fathers don't have a responsibility in this, but this right now, this is about their mother, their drug-addicted mother. So Shay goes on to talk about, you know, how, you know, she doesn't want a relationship with her mother and everything. And Iylana's hope is that, you know, she changes her mind about this, because the others, if she continues to dismiss the mother and dismiss the hurt, then the other sisters who are younger than her are going to follow her lead. And so, you know, she's hoping that she changes her mind. So Iylana asks Precious, you know, what's going on with you? You know, because Precious is still crying. Her, you know, her body is slumped over and everything. And she tells her to get on her lap. And she says that sometimes women have to be remothered. And Precious needed to be remothered by Iylana. So she just holds her in her arm, and she allows her to continue to cry and weep in her arms as she begins to, you know, really talk and really minister to the other sisters that are there. And she talks to that 7-month-old baby who was given to a family, the father's family, because the mother just did not want to be bothered with her. What a sad situation. Let me just say this too. I am going into detail about this particular episode because I have some nieces and nephews who are in Russia, and I have some who are in Africa, and they don't get the show like we get the show. And so a lot of what they see and a lot of what they hear is really from my reviews. So yes, I am going into detail about this episode. Bear with me. It goes more into, you know, detail with Precious. Precious seems to be the one that's really hurt. Even though Bianca wasn't raised with her mother, Precious is the one that's really hurt. And I think it's because of the environment that Precious was raised up in. And, you know, she asks her, what do you really want? And she says, I want to be able to call my mom. And she's like, well, you can't do that now. She said, not without her yelling. And Iylana says to her, sometimes you just want that mother, but who's really calling? Is it the 29-year-old or the 7-year-old? And she says, sometimes it's that 7-year-old. Iylana discovers through Bianca. Bianca is the 27-year-old that her grandmother that actually raised her had 6 kids and wasn't with their family. They were estranged. And then they start talking about the history of other women in the family who were estranged from their mothers and their brothers and sisters. How devastating. So anyway, we go on in the episode, and Iylana says, I want you all to see what you all have in common. Because what the mother has in common is what has happened in her bloodstream. I mean, you know, in her bloodline, her family bloodline. So she wants them to see. So she takes them in the backyard, and she puts them all in a line and says, I'm going to ask you some questions. And if you fit in the questions, then you switch place. If the question doesn't belong to you, then you don't switch place. So the sisters were lined up like this, and, you know, they would go back and forth. So, you know, she asks them, you know, first some kind of lighthearted questions. You know, who has had a weave before? And the sisters switch place because, you know, 2 of them didn't move because they were both natural sisters, and the other sisters moved. And then she asked them, you know, who's a virgin? And they switch places. You know, and then she asked them, who's been alone? And they all switch places. Who's felt lonely? And they all switch places. Who's been abandoned? And they all switched places. You know, I think about my relationship with one of my sisters, and it is estranged. I have not spoken to my sister in maybe, gosh, I guess about maybe 9 months. And it's hard when you when you are estranged from your siblings, because you know you're all each other have. Both my parents are deceased, and we're all each other have. Both of my parents died when I was 23 years old, and it was up to us to take care of ourselves and one another because we didn't have our parents anymore. And to be estranged from my sister means that I don't know what's happening with her. I'm not nurturing her. She's not nurturing me. It's just not healthy. And so this show is really personal to me. And it may be personal to some of you out there, you know, that have estranged relationships within your family. And I just pray that, you know, this show helps us all to develop relationships with our families, to get closer as brothers and sisters, cousins, moms. I know a lot of times in the 60s and 70s, and I talk about that, how parents were with their children. You know, there was a lot of abandonment, a lot of rape, a lot of incest that was going on in the black families, and it just wasn't talked about. And now here we are in 2017, and these things are starting to come out. These wounds, these hurts that's been in our community for a long time are now starting to come out. So I pray that if you have a member in your family that you are estranged from, or that you're estranged from anybody in your family, that God heals you and heals your family and makes you all whole again, that the wounds from the past will be opened and exposed, receive a brand new scab on it, and go through the healing process. You know, this show is just, this was just really, really personal. So anyway, enough of me. Well, let's go. Iylana meet with the mother, Alicia. Alicia comes in. She's a beautiful woman, okay? Beautiful African-American woman. And so she sits to her at the table. You know, they're outside having tea and crumpets. And she, you know, says, she rattles off all the girls' names. Keisha, Shay, Marcia, Precious, Bianca, and Mikhail. Think I got everybody. Marcia. And so, you know, she's like, they're angry with you. And she's like, they'll get over it. They'll get over it? Why the hell you think you here? They haven't gotten over it. Okay, I gotta digress. So she's like, you know, it was a lot going on, and, you know, they don't get along with each other, and, you know, they're angry with me, and woo-dee-woo-woo-woo. Okay, so how they gonna get over it? And then she goes on to say, it is what it is. No, it ain't what it is. It's more to it than what you say it is. And then Iylana goes on to ask her, why did you get rid of Precious? Okay, Precious was the 29-year-old. And so she says, well, I already had Shay and Keisha, and I didn't want to be burdened down with another child. What the? Are you serious? You didn't want to be burdened down with another child? I have a tendency to want to get angry about this, but you know why I won't? Because she was raped. She goes on to talk about, you know, how Precious was a result of a rape. But guess what? The man that raped you in the family, in the household you was living in, you left Precious in that household for them to raise. So you abandoned Precious and left her in the house or around the family of the rapist. How old was the mother at this time is what I'm thinking. How in the world do you leave your child, first of all, and then second of all, you leave them with the family of the rapist in Louisiana, thousands of miles away from you, and then you're going to say it is what it is. When she disclosed that to Iylana, Iylana said that was like taking a shot, a Hennessy, a shot of rum, a shot of vodka, a shot of gin. It sure was. So Iylana discovers this. She says, so you were in high school? And she's like, yeah, you know, I was in high school. And she said, so what did you tell Precious? Y'all guess what she told Precious? She told Precious, the child, the little baby, that I don't want to be hindered by another child. So Iylana was like, oh my God, that's, that's just devastating. That's so unacceptable. But I didn't want to take the responsibility for it. That's what I told her. And she said, and that's even worse. How the hell do you tell a baby that? A little child, that I don't want to be responsible for you because I don't want another child. But then you go on to have 3 more. Really? Well, Iylana goes on to tell her, that's unacceptable. We're going to have to come up with something else to tell your kids, because when they ask you this question, they're not asking you from the perspective of a 35-year-old. They're not asking you from the perspective of a 29-year-old. They're asking you from the perspective of a 7-year-old, of an 8-year-old. And you can see the apprehension with the mother and everything. And Iylana goes on to continue to talk to her. And eventually they move on into the house. When they come in the house, the girls start greeting her. Devastating. Because you can see the whole environment changed. Iylana tries to make light of it and say, y'all help y'all mother. Wow. So as with the mother's coming up the stairs, and like I said, Iylana tells them to help her. And so, Bianca walks over and pulls the mother's suitcase, gives her a kiss on the cheek, and each girl starts hugging the mother. And so when Precious hugs the mother's hugging Precious, and she's like, you could have called me. You could have reached out to me if you need help. And Iylana said, no, she didn't know, or she would have. How does a child that's abandoned at 7 months know that they can call you? And so, we got the 25-year-old Miss McHale standing in the background. I'm supposed to be last. I'm supposed to be last. You attention-seeking hussy. Oh, my God. Excuse me, y'all. This girl needs so much attention. So even though you feel like you got a close relationship with your mother, you still desire the mommy. Iylana keeps telling her over and over, they want their mommy, they want their mommy, they want their mommy. And that's exactly what all of them crave. And you see Shay standing to the background. So Shay, goes over and gives the mother a hug. The hug is dry. She's already established that she doesn't want a relationship with the mother. And Marcia makes the mistake of saying, look at how Shay hugged her. Oh my God, what did she say that for? Shay goes off. You need to mind your business. You need to mind your business. So, she's calling her, calls her out her name. She calls her a B, and then an argument ensues in the middle of the hallway. And Iylana says, you know what? I see the rage that's coming out of Shay. See, Shay's whole personality, her whole body, her whole makeup changed when the mother came in the house. Point blank. And so did all the other sisters. But Shay was just, how you just you got a ticking time bomb? That was Shay. And because Marcia said something to her, she popped off, y'all. And I mean, when I say popped off, popped off. And then they bring, they separate them and bring them in the room. And Shay is talking about, she always running her mouth. She's always saying this. She's always saying that. Nickname Patty Red, give a dog bone. Okay. And then Iylana says, I can see the disguise. She's trying to make this about her sister. This wasn't about her sister. This is about the mother. The mother that Shay doesn't want to have a relationship with. So later on we see Iylana, she brings them downstairs and she talks to, to them about, the relationship and different things like that. And she asks Marcia, how did you feel when your sister said that to you? And she was like, I felt hurt. If I had known she was going to pop off like that, I wouldn't have said anything. Well, it was a sensitive situation, Marcia. Sometimes you just need to learn how to keep your mouth shut. Okay, so then she goes to Shay and she says, Shay, what do you feel? And Shay's like, you know what? I apologize for how I said it, but I don't apologize for what I said. You need to keep your damn mouth shut. So Marcia is, is upset about it because she's like, I've always been there for Shay. I've always been there for her, and I just don't like the disrespect. It's so many things that I want to say, but I feel like I can't talk. And Iylana was like, you can talk. And she was like, no, she's just mean, and she's just nasty. But Shay is hurt She's learned how to build up their wall. All of them have in their own right. There are different areas in probably all of their lives where, you know, they've built this defense mechanism. And the first thing you do, like Iylana said, in order to not deal with the pain, you build up a wall and you become hard as women. We become hard, and that sometimes is what makes an angry black woman, because we're not angry at the people who are presently in our lives. We're angry about the things that are in the backside of our life. And I begin to weep for these sisters, like boo-hoo crying, because you see so much of yourself. You see so much of other people's families in this episode. Okay, I don't want to deal with me. Let me continue. The sisters say what they have to say. Iylana was like, you know, what you all don't realize is when you love somebody, that you can have a disagreement and it's not fatal. You say what you have to say, they say what they have to say, and then you come back together. And I think that a lot of times in families, you know, when we say things to each other and we're offended, or we get called out of our names or something like that, and we disagree with one another, you know, like we tend to be angry and we walk away, and we don't say what we need to say at the time, and we allow it to develop into something. To tell the mother, you know, the mother goes on to say, well, you know, I just, you know, I feel like I don't know why they go off, and the daughters was like, you do it. We learned that from you. She says that the mother's responsibility is to teach her daughter how to be a woman. Absolutely. And she tells her, Alicia, okay, she tells her, you have lost your privilege to correct them. Sure have. Sure have. Dishonor, disrespect, abandonment, withdrawal, anger, bitterness. Yeah, you've lost your ability to correct me on anything, especially when you are exhibiting that behavior. Girl, bye. Bye, Alicia. Bye. I can't forget this part. Precious goes on. Iylana tells Precious, because Precious is still crying, to, you know, explain to her mother how she's feeling. And she goes on to tell the mother, you know, that a year ago, she found the adoption papers, and that the mother had a year to come back and get her. And she asks the mother, why didn't you come back and get me? She says that on the paperwork, it said that you were going to abort me, but you changed your mind because you was convinced by family members not to do it. And the daughter says, you know what? You could have came back and got me in a year. You had 1 year to change your mind about the adoption. She has the mother hug her through this process. Then she tells the mother to turn to Shay. And Shay says, you know what, you always disappointed me. You always hurt me. And I always gave you chance after chance and time after time to fix the relationship, to do better. And every time you failed me. And I don't love you, and I don't trust you. And during this exercise, Iylana told the mother, don't even speak. Don't even speak. She's already told her you lost your ability to correct. Now you've lost your ability to talk. Only thing you can do is listen. Iylana goes on to talk about how, you know, you have to really know the difference between listening and hearing. And that, you know, when you don't, you always, you know, defend and protect. And so she tells Shay, do you realize that your breakdown with your sister affects your other sister? And so Keisha says, her stuff always affects me. And she was talking about the hurt that's in Shay. And she said, your hurt, Shay, is built up on your mother. And then she turns to the mother. Okay? She turns to the mother. And she goes on to talk to the mother about her trash. And that she needs to tell her daughters her story so that they understand their own story. So that they could be able to move past. And she was like, you tell them about your life. And don't leave nothing out. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Don't leave a thing out, Bookie. They deserve to hear it all. Because a lot of times we don't know what our parents have gone through. When my mother passed away, in 1989. There were so many things that I found out about my mother's past that, had I known, would have explained a lot to me about how I was treated, how my brothers and sisters were treated, why she reacted to certain things, why she put up with certain things. We owe it to our children to tell the truth. I have a daughter, a teenage daughter, who is going, she's a grown woman, but she's teenage still. And there are so many aspects of my life that I've shared with her. Yes, they were uncomfortable for me to share, but I shared them. And it's imperative. It's vitally important that we share our lives with our children, because they need to be able to put the puzzle pieces together and to figure out who they are. So we're going to be coming back. This looks like it's I think it's a 2-part, 3-part series. We're going to be coming back on this. I'm hoping that for all my nieces and nephews that live in Russia and the other places where you all are not able to get Iylana Fix My Life, I'm hoping that I did this review justice. I really am. But this is a family that's broken, and I'm hoping that they can come back together. Thank you all so much for watching my review. Auntie loves you. Bye-bye.